Welcome back. This is Yoram John, and today we'll be talking about survival strategies for Singapore family offices after 2025. We will be mainly navigating regulations and operational barriers. In recent years, Singapore has been a magnet for family offices. But after the 2025 reforms, it's no longer just a tax haven. You have to bring real substance. The regulations now demand higher thresholds and much more evidence of real activity. For example, observers note that the overhaul imposes higher minimum assets under management, increased local business spending, and tougher hire requirements for any fund seeking tax breaks. At the same time, MAS has promised to speed up approvals, aiming for a 3-month review process, but of course, provided that your application is perfectly complete. In other words, Singapore will process you quickly, but only if you're already meeting the heavier tests. In fact, the authorities made it clear there is no transition period. New applicants must already hit the new AUM, staffing, and spending test upfront. And you should not forget, MAS emphasized that vague or piecemeal applications simply will not fly. So, what are MAS and the banks really looking for now? Well, the bottom line is that they want substance, not shell. Since the big money laundering scandal, regulators have been demanding more information from family offices and even shutting dormant entities. Banks are equally on guard. Time reports that private banks are ramping up scrutiny of wealthy clients to avoid illicit flows. In practice, this means if you walk into a bank, they will ask hard questions such as, who are the principals? Where did the funds come from? What business is being done? And yada, yada, yada. They'll expect to meet your investment team and see evidence of actual operations. That means MAS and the banks will quickly spot an empty shell. They want to see real investment plans, actual Singapore hires or contractors, and clear source of wealth documentation. One local lawyer noted that the growth of new office has already slowed because of these tougher checks on AUM and transparency. Running a family office in Singapore still offers great benefits, but we have to remember that it's a business that costs money. Personnel are typically the largest expense, often almost half of your budget. Even a lean setup, say like 2 Singapore licensed investment managers, 1 compliance officer or accountant, and support staff, could easily cost 300 to 500K Singapore dollars a year in salaries alone. Add in office rent, IT, and communications, plus fees or auditors, lawyers, and accountants, and you're likely spending $500,000 Singapore dollars or more annually before any investments are made. McKinsey research suggests that for a small family office under perhaps 100 million US dollars AUM, total operating costs can run about 46% of AUM each year, which for, say, 50 million Singapore dollars under management means roughly 2 to 3 million Singapore dollars a year in expenses. On top of the dollars, there's the compliance workload, annual financial audits, tax filings, regulatory returns, AML KYC processes, and the new incentive reporting. It's manageable, but it's real. So, given these realities, let's talk strategy. First, I would like you to suggest that to consider an FO lite approach. In plain terms, this means not chasing the full tax exemption package at all. Instead, you set up a Singapore investment company or trust and accept paying the standard 17% of corporate tax on its profits. Why do this? because the setup is far simpler and cheaper to run. So given these realities, let's talk strategy. First, consider an FO light approach. In plain terms, this means not chasing the full tax exemption package at all. Instead, you set up a Singapore investment company or trust and accept paying the standard 17% corporate tax on its profits. And why do this? Because the setup is far simpler and cheaper to run. You avoid the big AUM, local spending, and multiple higher requirements imposed by the tax incentive program. In a mid-sized case, it may make better financial sense to pay a bit of tax than to meet all of those honors tests. You'll need a normal business license and reporting, but you will not have to spend hundreds or thousands on local activities or hire extra IPs just to qualify. In practice, many families find that the convenience and lower running costs of a basic structure can outweigh the benefit of zero tax. And think of it as trading some tax for simplicity. This light route means your Singapore entity is treated like an ordinary investment vehicle. You will still have to follow company law, of course, like file accounts, hold board meetings, and etc., but you can avoid the full Ministry of Finance checklist. Second, blend your Singapore office with overseas entities. In other words, split some functions or assets into a separate structure outside Singapore. For example, you might create a family foundation or trust in another jurisdiction to handle charitable giving or long-term legacy planning, while the core investment company sits in Singapore. Or you could co-invest through an offshore fund for certain deals. The idea is to satisfy economic substance by diversifying your setup. If MAS asks, what local activity are you doing? Well, you can show that some spending happens through the foundation or through real business partnerships. If the spending rule requires hundreds of thousands of Singapore dollar in local expense, maybe your international arm pays for regional projects or philanthropy that helps meet that goal. Likewise, if Singapore wants to see staff, you could say second one of your overseas analysts into the Singapore office, even part-time, to qualify as local hiring. Hybrid structures like this have been used by many families. The key is clear documentation and genuine purpose. You're not hiding anything, you're just organizing roles. Singapore becomes a strategic headquarters for Asian or international investments, while trusted partners abroad manage complementary pieces. This flexibility can help meet MAS's new standards without forcing the Singapore box to do everything by itself. And third is, of course, to plan and test everything in advance. Now, more than ever, your application needs to read like a complete business plan. MAS has been explicit that the new 3-month review is not about lowering standards. It's about removing red tape. So before you apply, you build your family office on paper. Write out your investment strategy, budget projection, hiring schedule, and exactly how you will meet the spending rules. For example, forecast your first 3 years of AUM and returns and show how those translate into local expenditures and hires. Decide which service providers you use and even what offices or third-party vendors will carry out the local spending. Collect your source of wealth documents early. Prepare polished biographies for key personnel and clarify any related party transactions. Essentially, do a dress rehearsal. MAS is warning that vague or piecemeal documentation will not be accepted, so leave no question unanswered. A complete application lets you leverage the fast track. It's a lot of upfront work, but it means you won't be kicked back for clarification and delays. Think of it as turning your family office plan into an investment grade proposal. When everything is laid out and consistent, regulators can sign off faster and you get to deploy capital that much sooner. Finally, let's look ahead. What happens in the next 3 years? Well, I expect a shakeout. Singapore will remain an attractive hub, but it will be populated by family offices with solid use cases. Those set up solely as quick tax schemes or empty shells probably will not last. Banks will close them or they'll quietly withdraw their applications. By contrast, the family offices that genuinely need a Singapore presence, for example, to manage business network in Asia or to coordinate a complex multi-generational estate, will stay and adapt. These families will tighten governance, invest in a small local team, and treat the office like the real business it is. Banks and advisors will notice who is serious. We may also see more multifamily or outsourced model options. Some private banks are already offering shared family office solutions for clients not ready to go solo. Korean families should think about that too. If your AUM is small, joining a multifamily office can access many benefits without all the fixed overhead. For Korean clients specifically, remember your home country angle too. Korean tax authorities will still look at your global structures, so transparency is critical. A credible Singapore family office or related entity is less likely to trigger red flags than a mysterious offshore shell. Make sure you work with Korean tax advisors so distributions or transfers between Korea and Singapore are done in a compliant way. In the coming years, Singapore might refine its rules further, but I expect it will stay a top wealth hub only if we play by the rules. Serious regulators and banks want trustworthy, well-run offices and not just parked money. So the bottom line is Singapore after 2025 is not a no question asked tax break. It's a sophisticated business location. But it's still an excellent base for a family that plans ahead. By accepting a realistic tax rate when needed, organizing a hybrid structure if it makes sense, and preparing a bulletproof plan, you can meet regulatory scrutiny and control costs. The families that will thrive here are those who design their offices for real activity. Robust investment programs, compliance-ready operations, and clear governance. Do that, and Singapore will reward your office with stability, network access, and the peace of mind that comes from being in a well-respected center. In short, focus on substance, not shortcuts. The market will sort itself, and the compliant, professional family offices will emerge stronger. I hope this gives you the lessons, and thank you for listening.